Breaking news. 229 women vanished. Not a statistic in a ledger, not a number in a government database. 229 human beings, daughters, mothers, sisters, who departed their home somewhere in Alaska and never returned. On this morning, in a Senate chamber in Washington, D.C., Senator Lisa Murkowski intended to hold the FBI director personally accountable for each one. Kash Patel had not anticipated what awaited him, because what nobody expected that day was this. The man who had skillfully sidestepped relentless questioning, the man who had transformed hostile exchanges into political wins, was about to face something different. Not documentary evidence, not a damaging email, but 9 seconds of silence. 9 seconds where America's top law enforcement official found himself without words. And in those 9 seconds, 229 names existed between them, unspoken and undeniable. But to grasp how we arrived at this moment, you must understand what Senator Murkowski brought into that chamber with her. Alaska ranks 4th nationally in missing and murdered indigenous women and girls, 4th among 50 states. And the numbers attached to that reality are the kind that haunt you. According to the Urban Indian Health Institute, 153 of those vanished women exist nowhere in official law enforcement records. No case file, no incident report, no federal documentation. The Institute calls them the invisible. Invisible because the system designed to protect them treated them as if they did not exist. Between 2021 and 2023, law enforcement logged over 25,800 violent crime incidents involving indigenous female victims in Alaska. In 2024, 69% of all murdered indigenous persons in the state were women and girls. Alaskan natives comprise roughly 19% of the state's population. The mathematics are stark. The disparity is catastrophic. For 15 years, Murkowski had walked into rooms exactly like this, reciting these figures, and watched officials nod politely before moving past them. Not this time. She entered with the collected demeanor of someone who had abandoned civility and demanded action. Her team had worked through the night cross-checking FBI data with state law enforcement files. She carried no dramatic flourishes. She brought facts and numbers, and in the right hands, numbers become a weapon far more effective than rhetoric. Patel arrived as he always did, commanding the room. His briefing team had prepared him for predictable topics. The northern border drug trade, federal detention gaps, Starlink expansion in tribal regions, typical Alaska concerns, all manageable. He had faced more difficult situations. His preparation team had miscalculated entirely. The hearing's first hour unfolded predictably. Budget discussions, counterterrorism briefings, interagency updates, rehearsed talking points. Patel was composed and assured. Multiple senators appeared satisfied. Reporters were already checking their screens. Then Murkowski's moment came. Everything shifted. Observers who tracked these sessions noticed it before she uttered a word. Something in how she positioned her documents. Something in the stillness before she began. Director Patel, she said, her tone sharp and deliberate, I want to discuss a number. 229. That represents the current documented count of missing and murdered indigenous persons in Alaska. 80 involved women confirmed deceased. 149 remain categorized as missing, and 75% of confirmed deaths are Alaskan Native women. She let silence fill the room. This is not peripheral information. This is an epidemic. Director, I need a concrete answer from you today. What will the FBI actually do? Not theoretical frameworks, not test programs. Real action. Now, Patel nodded with the assurance of someone who believed he held the answer. He was unprepared. Murkowski pressed forward immediately. Director, I want to be very clear about something frequently overlooked in these proceedings. The Urban Indian Health Institute identified 153 women who vanished without appearing in any law enforcement database. Not federal, not state, not anywhere. These women were systematically invisible to the apparatus you oversee. Their families searched in isolation without institutional backing. How, I ask you today, is that possible under your authority? Patel's composure remained steady, but careful observers, experienced Hill reporters, seasoned committee staff, detected something, a subtle tightening near his eyes. His pen shifted fractionally against the desk surface. He discussed Operation Steadfast Promise, the FBI's inaugural year-long focus initiative on tribal land crimes. He described Starlink equipment being deployed to isolated communities to enhance communication channels. He listed coordination improvements. Then, without shifting her tone at all, she posed a question that demolished everything underneath. Director, how many criminal convictions has Operation Steadfast Promise achieved in Alaska? The pause lasted under 3 seconds. 3 seconds in a silent Senate chamber feels interminable. Senator, we remain in the early operational phase of this initiative. Results require adequate time to develop. How many convictions? She did not shout. She simply interrupted his evasion. The program has produced improvements in coordination and communication infrastructure that is not a conviction answer. Director, the room absorbed the silence, that particular quiet emerging when truth arrives undisguised. Murkowski continued, I understand that law enforcement requires patience. She said, what matters now is that women in Alaska lack basic safety, not in villages, not in communities. And I must tell you something directly from those I represent. They feel most vulnerable in Anchorage, our largest city, where they should feel safest. This is ground truth, not documentation, not policy frameworks. The lived reality confronting Alaskan women right now. She extracted a single document from her folder. She read carefully without looking upward. The statistics we discuss are not stabilizing. They are deteriorating. 229 is not a maximum. It expands with each reporting cycle. It expands while families visiting my office pose a question I now pose to you. How many more must vanish before the federal response meets this crisis' scale? Give me a specific number, Director, because currently 229 is all we have, and it continues climbing. Patel responded with the language of institutional procedure, jurisdictional complications, national security considerations, resource competition. Murkowski's jaw tightened visibly. Patel had a litany of higher priority crises. Director, I recognize this nation faces significant threats across multiple fronts. But understand this clearly today. What transpires in Alaska is not secondary, not a regional addendum to be resolved when other matters conclude. 229 cases. That number does not pause for convenient timing, and I will not either. Murkowski wrote in her notebook as he spoke. She did not look up. When he finished, she set her pen aside and asked a question that concluded everything. Director Patel, when did you last personally travel to Alaska to examine this matter directly? Not a field office briefing, not a summary. When did you go yourself? 9 seconds. Every camera trained on his expression. Every reporter froze. 9 seconds of silence. Senator, the FBI's organizational model ensures comprehensive ground-level intelligence flow through regional field offices, which permits... That is not what I asked. Her voice had grown quieter than before. When were you personally there? He had not gone. He never stated it. But the absence spoke through every word he did not say, and the entire room received that message. His face did not pale. He controlled himself too well for that, but his body registered the impact, a slight postural shift, the kind bodies make absorbing a blow while maintaining composure. His left hand moved beneath the table. Murkowski allowed the silence to complete itself. Then she spoke again, and something beyond anger inhabited her voice, something more encompassing. I have carried this burden extended years, Director, and I must state this plainly for the record. These 229 women did not disappear because of structural complications. They did not vanish because of communication deficits. They disappeared and remained missing because the system mandated to safeguard them perpetually classified them as secondary priorities. I need you to confirm that situation has transformed, not program names, not task force identifiers. A commitment, specific, measurable, defined, to these 229 open Alaska cases. Patel offered his response. He referenced ongoing evaluations. He cited resource reallocation conversations in progress. He mentioned interagency cooperation structures under Operation Steadfast Promise and communication advances already evident in preliminary field data. Murkowski continued writing. I have listened to the FBI explain resource limitations and operational obstacles for 15 years, she said, her voice carrying the weight of exhaustion from repeating herself endlessly. Allow me to be direct. When will comprehensive investigation begin? When will real improvements reduce these numbers? Not maintain them, not stabilize them, actually decrease them. Because right now, Director, each answer is simply another version of non-answer, and Alaska's women merit more. She closed her folder. The chamber's silence lingered longer than necessary. In subsequent days, Murkowski's office formally requested a dedicated FBI briefing examining Alaska's MMIP cases, not general updates, but detailed status evaluation of all 229 open files. Patel's office confirmed receipt. No timeline was offered. Inside the Alaska FBI field office, agents laboring years on MMIP cases watched the hearing replay wordlessly. One agent speaking privately to Senate staff characterized it simply. She articulated what we have been attempting to communicate internally for years. She simply possessed the platform. The 229 cases stay open. The families persist in waiting. Kash Patel, who entered that morning convinced he could navigate another routine oversight session, departed having surrendered something no framework or program could retrieve. Not scandal, not a leak, something quieter, more durable. 9 seconds when America's chief law enforcement official possessed no reply to a woman who constructed her career on relentless questioning. The silence expressed everything. Senator Murkowski had manufactured that silence with only directness and willingness to let it persist. And to everyone watching, do you believe the federal government truly recognizes the indigenous women disappearing in Alaska as the national emergency the evidence suggests? Or do we observe another cycle of program rollouts, press statements, and hopeful waiting while families search unassisted? Submit your thoughts and responses, because as demonstrated today, silence communicates, and certain silences carry more meaning than any testimony could ever deliver. But the narrative did not terminate when cameras powered down. In actuality, that was where the genuine story commenced, because within Washington, such moments typically vanish beneath other headlines within hours. Another hearing, another tense interaction, another viral segment lost in daily noise by morning. This exchange persisted, because those 9 seconds resonated differently. Not merely the pause itself, but what it uncovered. The chasm separating federal institutional language from the reality, confronting Alaska families each day. Within 48 hours, that separation became visible to everyone. Murkowski's office received a deluge of communications. Tribal representatives, advocacy networks, families of disappeared women who had spent years requesting authorities publicly acknowledge what the hearing had now exposed. Certain individuals carried photographs for over 10 years. Certain individuals reviewed their phones each night, waiting for communication that never materialized. Suddenly, for the first time in extended years, they perceived institutional recognition. Someone inside the system had forced national consciousness toward them. Yet inside FBI headquarters, reactions diverged. Hearings remained performance until they produced tangible pressure. This hearing generated pressure immediately. Senior leadership examined internal Alaska case, files dormant for extensive periods. Regional commanders received requests for updated briefings. Concerns previously deflected upward accelerated dramatically. Why? Murkowski had executed something potent. She had transformed a crisis entombed in statistics into a moment people could feel, not contained in documents, not secreted within bureaucratic footnotes, transmitted straight to the FBI director's face on national platforms, repeatedly, until 229 became impossible to disregard. That is how Washington operates. Not via documentation, via attention. And what magnified the impact was what followed. Journalists initiated questioning nobody had previously pressed. If FBI had implemented programs, task forces, and infrastructure initiatives across years, why had numbers accelerated? Why did families maintain independent investigations? Why did Alaskan women openly declare they remained unprotected? The administration attempted measured reaction. Statements emphasized commitment, collaboration, continuous investigation. Officials highlighted rural Alaska's structural obstacles. geographic isolation, climatic conditions, overlapping authorities spanning tribal, state, federal domains. Technically accurate, emotionally hollow, because Murkowski had pivoted discussion from procedure toward consequences, and consequences are infinitely harder controlling, particularly after viral propagation. Millions access the exchange without understanding Senate mechanics, federal authority, or procedural frameworks. They perceive one thing. A senator posed direct inquiry regarding vanished women. America's FBI director remained silent. That remains a memory. Not policy terminology, not briefing books, but silence. For Alaska families, that silence mirrored their own experience. Silence answering case submissions, silence after requesting information, silence while investigation stalled. That was the weight beneath Murkowski's challenge. Not theatrical politics. Exhaustion. 15 years witnessing repetition while numbers climbed. And somewhere inside FBI headquarters, officials grasped something additional, creating discomfort. Murkowski's inquiries were not extreme. They were elementary. Convictions, personal visits, specific modifications. Simple questions transform dangerous when systems cannot respond clearly. Weeks afterward, Alaska activists replayed hearing segments during community meetings. Tribal leaders referenced the exchange in addresses. Organizations distributed clips online, positioning photographs and identities of disappeared women alongside audio. The hearing escaped confinement to Washington, and containment becomes nearly impossible after that occurs. But perhaps most deeply resonant came from Alaska law enforcement internally. Discreetly off-record, multiple investigators acknowledged identical realities. Funding had not matched catastrophe dimensions. Cases stretched across impossible distances. Remote regions received inconsistent investigative support. Families frequently felt abandoned before any national spotlight emerged. That reality no statement neutralizes. Because once the nation heard those 9 seconds of silence, inquiry expanded. How many reports went overlooked? How many leads remain unpursued? How many families abandoned belief in eventual help? Those inquiries did not end following the hearing. They magnified. And Kash Patel, accustomed to surviving Washington's sharpest challenges, encountered a lesson many commanding officials eventually absorbed too late. Surviving a hearing differs fundamentally from escaping its aftermath, because sometimes maximum damage arrives not from accusation. It comes from silence following questions. And in that chamber, with 229 names suspended invisibly, silence transformed into the loudest message present.